I've always preferred the woods to people. That sounds dramatic, I know, but if you've ever worked in an open-plan office full of humming fluorescent lights, pointless small talk, and forced birthday celebrations, you'll understand. I work in IT, sitting behind screens all day, fixing things no one else wants to understand. I've got friends, sure, mostly online, but I'd rather spend a weekend without Wi-Fi in the woods than one more Saturday night hearing about someone's new video game rank. Every fall I disappear into the wilderness for a few days. Solo backpacking trips, no cell reception, no social media, just trees, wind, and the crunch of leaves underfoot. This year I pushed it further than I ever had. I just turned 35, recently dumped my long-term girlfriend Melissa, and burnt out from back-to-back deadlines at work. I needed quiet. I needed stillness. I needed to rest my system like a crashed server. I picked a stretch of state forest I hadn't explored before, not one of the well-known family trails. I went and looked up something on satellite images. I found a wide path of wilderness with no service roads, no campsites, just miles of trees and silence. I planned for a 5-day trip, in and out, fully self-sufficient. I left on a cool Monday morning in mid-October. The first day was perfect. Golden light filtering through thinning leaves, birds flying overhead, the smell of moss and distant wood smoke. I followed a narrow trail until it vanished into the underbrush, then navigated with my GPS. Around noon, I passed a patch of white mushrooms growing in an odd spiral, but beautiful. Around 3, I found a high ridge overlooking a dry creek bed and set up camp there. I had a view for miles. That night, the woods were alive with sound. Crickets, owls, the occasional rustle of deer moving through fallen leaves. I cooked over my little camp stove and fell asleep to the firelight flickering across my tent walls. The silence woke me. It wasn't the normal kind of quiet, like when the wind dies down or the fire burns out. This was absolute. No insects, no rustling, no wind, like the whole forest was holding its breath. I sat up in my sleeping bag and listened. Then I saw the shape. One through the mesh of my tent, just at the edge where my firelight faded into darkness. Something stood among the trees. I froze. My brain tried to explain it. A tree trunk? A shadow? But it moved. Not a full step. Just a slight adjustment, like someone shifting weight from one foot to the other. It was tall. Unnaturally tall. 7 feet at least. Thin, too gaunt in a way people aren't. Its arms hung low, almost down to its knees. It didn't step closer. It didn't run. It just stood there, watching. I didn't breathe. My skin crawled. My fingers inched toward the knife beside my sleeping bag, but I never looked away. Eventually I shut my eyes and laid back down, hoping it would go away. By dawn it had. I told myself it was a dream, some kind of half-awake hallucination. I'd hiked hard that day. Maybe I'd been more than I'd realized. A part of me knew I'd seen something real. Day 2 was different. The woods felt different. My light didn't filter through the trees the same way. The birdsong was fainter. My compass started acting erratic, spinning slowly, pausing, and spinning again. I kept moving deeper. About midday, I found something that made me stop cold. A clearing, perfectly round, maybe 50 feet across. No undergrowth, no leaves, no deadfall, just hard-packed dirt, like the ground had been scrubbed clean. In the center was a structure, 10 feet tall, made from interwoven branches, vines, and strips of bark. It didn't look random. It looked constructed, purposeful. It had no door, no visible entrance, just a tight tide of natural material wound together into a kind of tall, closed shelter. The way it reflected light, dull and gray, it almost looked wet. I didn't go in. I didn't even step into the clearing. As soon as I got within 10 feet of the edge, I felt something. Pressure in my ears, a high-pitched hum in my skull. My legs wanted to step forward, but my spine screamed to back away. So I did. I turned and walked in the opposite direction for 2 solid hours without stopping. Didn't check the map, didn't drink, just walked. That night I set up my tent. I just unrolled my sleeping bag in a thicket off the main path, ate a cold protein bar, and tried not to think about the thing I saw in the clearing. The footsteps came around midnight, soft at first, like someone barefoot circling. I lay perfectly still, knife in hand. The steps would stop, then resume, slow, measured, and closer. At one point, I swear I heard breathing, not like an animal, like a person, but labored, wet. I wanted to unzip the sleeping bag and bolt, but I couldn't move. My limbs felt frozen. I didn't sleep. At dawn, there were no tracks, no sign anything had been there. I told myself to go back. I even turned around, took maybe 50 steps. Then I saw something that made me stop again. A small pile of stones, stacked carefully in a spiral. Not big, maybe the size of a football, right in the middle of the trail. I hadn't put them there. And the weird thing? There were strands of hair woven between the stones, long black strands, like someone tied the rocks together. I stepped around it and kept walking deeper. Don't ask me why. I think something in me had already broken. By the fourth day, I was completely turned around. My GPS didn't work anymore, just a static screen frozen in place. My compass needle spun like it was drunk. I hadn't seen a bird or squirrel in hours. Then I started hearing the voices. At first, I thought it was my imagination, maybe echoes of my own thoughts, but they were more distinct, whispering low, like someone standing just out of my sight, murmuring too quietly to understand. Every time I stopped, they stopped. Every time I moved, they picked back up. Sometimes I saw movement through the trees, tall gray shapes that ducked behind trunks just before I could focus on them. By sunset, I was crying without realizing it. I remember collapsing by a rock outcropping and burying my face in my arms. I whispered over and over, "I just want to go home. I just want to go home." And then I heard something mimic me. Not echo, mimic. The same words, same voice, said back to me from the trees, "I just want to go home." But it was wrong, flat, like someone repeating sounds they didn't understand. I didn't sleep that night either. On what I think was the fifth day, I gave up trying to find my gear. I just walked aimlessly. I don't know how long. At some point, I blacked out. When I woke up, my clothes were torn. My hands were scratched and bloody, like I'd been running through the trees. That evening, by some miracle, I stumbled onto a gravel friar road. I fell to my knees when I saw it, an unnatural line cutting through the trees. I followed it for hours until I found a foresty shack. It was empty, but unlocked. Inside was a landline, and it worked. I called 911. They found me the next morning. Here's the part that still haunts me. They said I'd been gone for 8 days. I argued. I said it'd been 5, maybe 6 at most. They shook their heads. Show me the report. Melissa had filed the missing persons report when I didn't check in on her on the 5th day. Rangers found my abandoned gear on day 6. They've been searching ever since. But no one could explain the structures in the clearing. I brought them back, or tried to, but when we got there, the area was just forest. No clearing, no packed dirt, no cone of branches, nothing. But I didn't imagine it. I know what I saw. Even now, months later, I have nightmares. Sometimes I still hear footsteps outside my window at night, or whispers just behind the wall. My therapist says it's PTSD, that it'll fade. But sometimes, in the very middle of the night, I get this feeling like something is watching me from the tree line at the edge of my backyard, like something followed me back. And some nights, just as I'm about to drift off, I swear I hear my own voice whispering from the hallway, "I just want to go home." I've always loved maps. Paper ones, old school, water-stained, folded over 100 times kind of maps. I keep a drawer full of them at home, each one marked with circles and notations. Saw a bear here, nice stream, avoid deadfall. There's something comforting about knowing where you are, being able to plot yourself with thumb and say, right here, that's where I am. But the road I found last fall in the northern woods of Maine wasn't on any map. Not the old Forest Service maps, not the 2020 satellite overlays, not even the GPS app I use. It just existed, and I'm still not sure if it should have. I'd driven up from Portland with my dog, Jake. planning a solo weekend hike through a stretch of national forest land just south of the Canadian border. Nothing too ambitious. 2 nights out, then a loop back. I'd even flagged a few waypoints I wanted to check out. A supposed old fire lookout, a beaver pond, and a waterfall one guy in a forum swore was impossible to find but worth it. It was late November. The air had a bite to it. A dry wind whispered through the pines, and the light stayed gold longer in the afternoon. I left my truck on the shoulder of an old logging road and hiked in. The first day was perfect. I made it about 7 miles in before setting up camp beside a creek. Jake curled up by the fire like he always did, ears perked, nose twitching every so often like he was dreaming. But the second day was when everything started to go off. I'd gotten turned around before. Every hiker has, but this was different. The trail I'd planned to follow north had completely vanished, not overgrown, gone. I backtracked, thinking I just missed a turnoff across the game trail without noticing, but everything looked wrong. Worse, my GPS started glitching. At first it froze, then it rebooted. When it finally came back online, my position was listed as being 20 miles southwest of where I'd started. That wasn't possible. I sat down on a log, unfolded the paper map, and compared. My landmarks didn't match. The ridgeline to the west was too steep, the drainage too shallow. It was like the land had rearranged itself. Jake was unsettled too. He kept staring off into the trees, his ears pinned back, not in fear, but like he was listening for something. That was when I saw it. A road. Not a trail, not a footpath. A road. It cut through the trees ahead, just past the slope we'd camped on the night before. It was narrow and overgrown, but clearly man-made. Gravel packed into soil, lined with deep-set ruts from long vanished tires. I didn't remember seeing it yesterday. It wasn't on the map, but it was there. And it looked old, wrong somehow, like no one had driven it in decades. Yet there were no fallen trees across it, no leaf cover, just a faint path of packed dirt leading northeast into a part of the forest that didn't exist on my chart. Jake stared down the road and whimpered once, low in his throat. I should have turned around, but I didn't. I followed it. It was gentle at first, barely a slope, winding through thick pine groves where no sunlight reached the ground. The deeper I went, the quieter the forest became. No birdsong, no insects, just the soft crunch of my boots and Jake's paws beside me. About an hour in, I noticed something that stopped me cold. The trees along the road weren't natural. They were evenly spaced, perfectly so, every 20 feet, one on the left, one on the right, all the same diameter, same lean, like someone had planted them that way on purpose. Jake began growling. He wouldn't move forward until I called him by name. Even then, he walked close beside me, head low, tail stiff. Then we passed the first sign. It wasn't readable, just a rectangular plank nailed to a tree, the lettering worn away by time and weather, but it had been carved, not painted. Someone had taken the time to chisel letters into the wood, then let them fade. I reached up and touched it. The wood was warm, not sun-warm, not ambient, warm like flesh. We kept walking. Eventually the road began to descend. It wasn't steep, but the shift in pressure was noticeable. My ears popped. The trees began to change too, more twisted, warped like they'd grown too fast and in the wrong directions. Branches coiled toward the road like grasping fingers. Then came the smell. Not strong, just enough to wrinkle your nose, rotting leaves, mold, and something chemical, like engine grease or wet metal. And still no animal sounds, not even the wind. At one point I glanced at my watch and realized we'd been walking for nearly 3 hours. No intersections, no signs of life, no old campsites, fire rings, wrappers, nothing. Just this endless road through the woods that didn't match the elevation or the terrain on any map I owned. Then, Jake stopped. He stood completely still, facing ahead, his tail rigid, a low growl rumbling in his chest. I followed his gaze and saw a gate. It came out of nowhere, suddenly visible just around a bend, a rusted metal barrier across the road, flanked by 2 stone pillars half swallowed by vines and moss. No writing, no lights, no locks. Behind it, the road continued, and beyond that, I swear it looked like buildings. Just the edges of them, visible through the trees, dark shapes, old structures, slouched and half covered in ivy. No lights, no smoke, no movement. But there was something else, a sound, faint, like music played on a warped cassette tape. Too slow, too low, a few notes repeating. Jake barked, sharp and panicked, and turned, bolting back the way we came. I stood there for maybe a minute more, listening to that music, staring through the gate at that place that shouldn't exist. Then I followed him. We ran until my legs gave out. We didn't stop until the road behind us disappeared into the trees again. When I finally stopped to check my bearings, my GPS was working again. We were somehow only 4 miles from the original trailhead. It took another 2 hours to get back to the truck. I didn't speak a word on the drive home. Jake didn't make a sound. A few days later, I went online, searched every map database I could find, checked historic land records. Nothing. No road, no settlement, no mention of any structures in that part of the forest. I even posted on a hiking forum, vaguely describing what I saw. One reply stuck with me. Some guy from Vermont saw it too. Don't go back. It's older than the maps. I still have the marked map in my drawer. Still know the coordinates I flagged as the closest point. But I won't go back. Jake doesn't go near trees now, not even at the park. And sometimes at night, when the wind hits just right, I swear I hear that faint music playing, too slow, too low, like it's waiting, just past the gate. People always say you're supposed to respect nature. They say bears are more scared of you than you are of them, that if you make enough noise, they'll run off. Unless you threaten a cub or surprise them, you'll be fine. That's what I used to believe too, before the trip, before I saw in the northern Cascades, before I learned that some things in the woods don't run, they don't scare, they watch, and sometimes they remember you. I'm not new to the backcountry, been hiking since I was a kid. I grew up in Washington, and my old man raised me on stories of high ridges and cold streams, hunting trips, and blizzards. When I was old enough to carry a pack without toppling over, he dragged me up mountains and into forests so dense that the sun never touched the floor. After he died, I started hiking solo. Not out of spite or sadness, it just felt right. Peaceful, clean. I never liked talking much, and the woods didn't ask for anything except that you keep moving forward and respect the land. Last September, I took a week off work. No plans, just me, my gear, and a remote loop trail near the lake. One of those places that looks like God carved it out with a glacier and forgot to put it on a map. Rugged country, sharp ridges, no cell service, perfect. I parked at the end of a logging road and started up the loop clockwise. Weather was good, crisp but dry. The trees were starting to turn that deep gold that makes the forest glow around sunset. The first 2 days were perfect, but by the third, everything had changed. It started with the prints, huge ones, deep in the mud right outside my tent when I woke up. Wide set paths, claw marks, digging forward, as long as my hand, from heel to fingertip. I'd never seen bear tracks before, and these weren't normal. They were too deep, like the thing weighed more than it should have. I knelt beside them, studying. It wasn't lumbering like a black bear's walk. It was methodical, each step placed precisely, like it was pacing, observing. I looked around, no torn up food bag, no ripped tent, just the tracks, and they circled my camp. Not once, 3 full loops, no sign of rooting, just a silent, calculated walk around me while I slept. I packed up fast. That whole day I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Not that silly urban paranoia, something deeper, like I wasn't the top of the food chain out there anymore. Around mid-afternoon I found a half-eaten deer. One, more accurately, that used to be a deer. It had been torn in half, not eaten cleanly, but ripped, snapped, one leg hanging from a nearby branch like someone had thrown it. Now, I've seen what a bear can do to a deer. But this wasn't that. There were no bite marks, no tearing at the organs, just raw animal violence, more like rage than hunger. The eyes had been removed cleanly, as if plucked out. I pushed hard to make it out of that valley before nightfall. That night, I didn't set up a tent, just rolled my sleeping bag out under a thick pine and kept the fire going all night. I didn't sleep much. Around 3 a.m., I heard the breathing, heavy and labored, like bellows drawing slow, damp air. It wasn't far, 30, maybe 40 yards off, just beyond the reach of the firelight. I sat up, and the sound stopped. I picked up my flashlight and swept the trees. That's when I saw them. Eyes, low to the ground, far apart. Not glowing like a cat's, just there, matte and unblinking. They stared at me. I blinked and they were gone. I stayed awake until dawn. Day 4, I made a dumb decision. I left the trail. Thought I could cut east, shorten my loop by a day. I told myself it was smart. Get out faster. Put more distance between me and whatever was out there. It was a mistake. The terrain off trail was rough, deadfall, thick brush, uneven ground. Around noon, I slipped on moss-covered granite and slammed my hip into a boulder. Nothing broke, but walking got a lot slower. Worse, the prints were back. I saw them crossing in front of me, near a dry creek bed, fresh, deep, pointed in my direction. I stopped eating that day. My stomach felt like a rock. That night I made a small fire and didn't let it go out. I kept my back to a cliff wall and held my father's hunting knife in one hand and revolver in the other. Around midnight the smell hit me, like wet fur, copper, and rotting meat left out in the sun. Thick, inescapable. It clung to the back of my throat and made my eyes water. Then the breathing came again, but this time it wasn't still. It moved, around me, circling slowly. I stood, pointed the gun out into the dark. "Back off!" I shouted. "I'm armed!" Silence. Then a sound I still hear in my dreams. Laughter. Not human, not loud, just breathy and mocking. I fired a single shot into the trees. Silence again. Then a branch cracked, and another. Something ran. Not away, alongside me. Fast, four-legged, massive. It passed so close I could feel the air ripple. I didn't sleep that night either. Day 5, I was limping badly. No food, half a canteen of water. I hadn't seen the sun in 2 days, just a gray overcast that seemed to follow me. I was running on instinct, trying to keep moving downhill. That's when I saw it. Not the bear, the den. It was carved into the hillside like a sinkhole, surrounded by bones. Not just animal, antlers, femurs, cracked human skull so old, the bone was bleached white. Around the entrance, claw marks, so deep and long they'd scarred the stone. The trees around it were stripped of bark, covered in deep gashes like something had thrashed against them in a fury. I didn't go near it, but I knew it had been following me from there. That night, I lost it. Sometime after dark, I felt it coming again. The smell, the quiet, the pressure. I built the biggest fire I could, emptied my last round into the woods. Nothing. Then, from the darkness, a sound like branches snapping in rhythm. Crunch, crack, crunch, crack. Step, drag, step. Then the eyes, closer now. I aimed the empty revolver at them, pulled the trigger. Click. They didn't flinch. So I grabbed my knife and backed up against the fire. "You want me?" I said. "Come on, then." And it did. But not all at once. It stepped forward slowly into the firelight. It looked like a bear, but it wasn't. It was too big, too long. Its front limbs bent wrong. Its jaw hung open, like a little too wide, and the teeth inside weren't right. Too many, too thin. Its fur was matted and patchy, with skin beneath that rippled like something else moved underneath. But the worst part was its eyes. Not animal, human. Tired, ancient, and aware. It stared at me across the flames, and then it smiled. I don't remember what happened after that. I woke up at the base of a ranger's tower 2 days later, dehydrated and half delirious. They flew me out in a helicopter, said I'd wandered 30 miles off trail. No one believed me, of course. They chalked it up to exhaustion, hunger, fever dreams. But I know what I saw, and I've never been back in the woods. And sometimes, late at night, I hear a sound outside my window. Step, drag, and the faint smell of pine sap, blood, and fur. I've been backpacking alone since I was 17. I know every rule. Leave no trace, hang your food, never hike in cotton, don't camp too close to the water, never, under any circumstance, approach a cabin or shelter that isn't yours. The last one used to sound more like superstition than real advice. One of those eerie warnings older hikers tell you around a campfire. like ghost stories to keep the mood spooky. But now I know it's the one rule that matters most, because out in the deep woods of Montana, I broke that rule, and I barely made it out. Last summer, I took time off between jobs and went on a solo trip in the National Forest. Not to tourist trails either. I've been eyeing a stretch of backcountry few people ever touched. No ranger outposts, no fire roads, just uncut forest and elevation gain that would scare off most weekend warriors. I packed light but smart. 5 days of food, 2 purification methods, and a .38 revolver I'd only ever fired at cans. My journal. I always keep a journal out there. It helps me stay grounded. The first 3 days went smooth, too smooth looking back. The trail was barely a game path, just enough of a dip between trees to guide me. Birds called overhead, elk signs showed up in the mud. The sky stayed clear and blue. On the third night, I camped beside a narrow stream on a bed of pine needles and fell asleep to the sound of running water. At some point that night, I woke up without knowing why. No wind, no crickets, nothing, just stillness. I lay there staring up through the mesh at the trees. Then I heard a sound that I can still recall with sickening clarity. A match being struck, a soft pshk. Then the flickering glow of flame, far off but visible. Not a campfire, not a lantern, a candle. Someone had lit a candle out there in the woods, deep past any marked trail. A lone, moving light between black trunks. I froze. Every part of me said, "Don't move. Don't even breathe." The light bobbed slightly. It was being carried, and then it stopped. Just far enough that I couldn't see the person holding it, only the glow through the trees, and it stayed there, watching. By morning, the candle and whoever held it was gone. I debated hiking out, but I was 3 days in, with no obvious danger. No tracks, no confrontation. Maybe someone else had gone off-grid, a fellow nutcase like me, or maybe I dreamed it. So I pushed deeper. That was mistake number 2. Around noon, I found the clearing. It wasn't on my map. It felt wrong the moment I stepped into it. The ground was flat, the grass patchy and brown, and at the far end, maybe 40 yards away, stood a cabin. Old, sunken slightly into the earth, like the forest had tried to reclaim it and failed. The wood was gray, splintered, warped from rain. No smoke from the chimney, no path to the door, and no signs of life. But there was something, a shape in the window. I couldn't tell what it was. Cloth, maybe, or hair. I should have turned back right then. Instead, I moved closer. 20 yards away, I noticed the bones. At first, I thought they were animal. Deer, maybe. But some were small, not childlike. Human hands stripped clean and hanging from a string like wind chimes. That was the moment my guts twisted. Every instinct screamed, run. But just as I turned, the door creaked open, and a man stepped out. Tall, thin, filthy. His beard was a mat of leaves and moth. His face was cracked with sun and time. He wore a patchwork of pelts stitched together with string. And no shoes, just bare feet. And his eyes, they were pale, clouded but focused, fixed on me with this mix of confusion and delight, like he couldn't believe I was real. His smile revealed rotten teeth. "You lost?" he asked, his voice hoarse from disuse. I wanted to lie, but all I managed to say was, "Just hiking." He laughed, coughed into his hand. Something wet and red dripped between his fingers. "Ain't many that come through here," he said. "Ain't many leave, neither." My hand went to the revolver at my hip. Subtle, I forced a smile. "It's just moving through," I said. "Didn't know anyone lived out here." He tilted his head. "I don't," he said. "Not really." I backed up a step. "I should be going. I got a lot more ground to cover." He looked past me toward the trees. "You won't. It's watching now." "What is?" His smile widened. "The hollow. It eats what comes in." I turned and walked, fast. I didn't run, not yet. I didn't want to look scared, but I was scared. I hiked hard for 3 hours, constantly checking over my shoulder. No sign of him. No more candlelight. Just me and the forest again. But everything was different now. The birds were gone. The trees creaked even when there was no wind. And every so often, I'd hear that same sound, the striking of a match. That night, I didn't sleep. I camped without a fire, ate nothing, drank barely enough to wet my throat. I kept the revolver close and my eyes on the dark. Sometime after midnight, I heard the footsteps. Bare, slow, crunching pine needles one at a time, just outside my tent. Then a whisper, close. "You came too far." I didn't speak, didn't move. Eventually the steps moved away. By morning I decided to abandon the loop entirely. I took a bearing east, toward a ranger station marked on an old map. Probably a 20-mile hike. I could make it in 2 days, but I didn't make it that far. Midday I saw the cabin again. The same cabin. Same bones, same sagging roof, even though I'd hiked the opposite direction for hours. That's when I realized I wasn't just lost. I was trapped. The forest wasn't letting me leave. I ran, I screamed. I fired a shot into the air. No echo, just stillness. Then movement behind me. I turned and saw him again. The hermit, but closer now. Eyes wild, face crazy. A string of tiny bones clutched in his hand. "You fed it," he said, grinning. "It's waking up now." I raised the revolver. "Back off." But he didn't flinch. "Won't help. You're in it now like the others." Others? He nodded toward the trees, and I saw them. Not people, not anymore. Faces, pale, stretched, grown into bark. Eyes wide, mouths open in frozen screams, melded with the trunks, like the trees had consumed them. I ran. I don't remember the next 2 days. Not really. Just flashes. Mud, blood, screaming. Running until my legs collapsed. Seeing things in the corner of my vision. Shapes that moved like men but weren't. I finally stumbled onto a road. Collapsed in the dirt, a hunter found me. I weighed 30 pounds less. Had a broken ankle and dozens of cuts I couldn't explain. They never found the cabin. Never found the man. Search and rescue combed the area. GPS pings led nowhere. I told them I got lost. Hallucinated from dehydration. That's easier than the truth. Sometimes I hear that sound again, even here in the city. That soft fshk of a match being struck. And once, just once, I found something on my windowsill. A piece of twine with a small bone tied to it. They found me in the Bitterroot Mountains, 6 miles off any trail. I was barefoot, dehydrated, my feet torn to shreds and caked in mud. My fingernails were filled with dirt, like I'd been clawing at something. When the search and rescue team reached me, I was curled up against the base of a tree, shivering and mumbling to myself. I didn't know my name. I didn't know how I'd gotten there. I didn't even know what state I was in. The EMT said I was lucky to be alive. They took me to a small hospital. For 3 days I lay in a hospital bed, answering questions I didn't understand. I didn't know my name until someone matched my fingerprints to a missing persons report. 28 years old, from Boise, reported missing nearly 4 weeks earlier after disappearing during a weekend camping trip in Idaho. According to my friends, I'd wandered off to gather firewood and never came back. No scream, no sign of struggle, no trail to follow, just gone. I was found 160 miles from where I disappeared. No one could explain that. My sister Katie drove in to bring me home. She barely let me out of her sight for the first few days. She was gentle, but I could feel her watching me, like she was trying to solve a riddle with my face. And I didn't blame her. I didn't feel like myself either. I kept flinching at normal sounds, phones ringing, dogs barking, the hum of the refrigerator. I couldn't go outside if there were trees nearby. I kept walking up in the middle of the night, thinking I heard someone breathing just outside the bedroom window. I had no memory of what had happened to me. None. The doctor said it might be a trauma-induced amnesia, a dissociative state brought on by something terrifying, possibly even violence. They said my memories could come back gradually or not at all. That wasn't comforting. I felt like there was a wall inside my mind, something I could almost see the edges of but couldn't climb over. Then, I started dreaming. In the first dream, I was walking through dense forest in the middle of the night. I was barefoot, eyes wide open, my face blank and expressionless, but I wasn't seen from behind my own eyes. I was floating above myself, watching like a passenger in the dream. I followed something ahead of me, just out of view. I couldn't tell what it was, only that it moved smoothly and silently, drawing me further and further off the trail. At one point I stopped and whispered something under my breath. I couldn't understand the words at first, but the final second before waking up, they rang clear. It waits in the hollow. I woke up in a cold sweat, gasping. My hands were shaking. My fingernails were packed with dirt again, real dirt, under my real nails. Katie found me in the backyard an hour later, barefoot, staring into the trees beyond the fence. She asked what I was doing out there. I told her I didn't remember going outside. That was when I stopped pretending I was okay. I started researching, deep diving into every wilderness missing persons case I could find in the Pacific Northwest. I found stories about people vanishing into the woods without a trace, only to reappear days or weeks later with no memory. Some of them wandered out, like forests, ghosts. Some never came back at all. Most cases were closed with some shrug about exposure or injury, but there were enough that didn't add up. One name came up again and again in old forums and rangers' blogs. No coordinates, no official name, just a legend whispered between locals and survivalists, supposedly somewhere in the wilderness between Idaho and Montana. A place people didn't go, a place people didn't leave. I found that name scribbled in my journal, and I didn't remember writing it. One afternoon, I went through the belongings that I had when I was found. My clothes were shredded. My phone was missing. My backpack had been left behind, found later by searchers, empty and torn. But there was one thing inside that no one had paid much attention to. A bundle wrapped in moss and tied with a string. I opened it. Inside was a small bird skull and a clump of blonde hair. The hair had been tied with a strip of red fabric, and it wasn't mine. I dropped it and stepped back like I'd been burned. A flash of memory hit me like a bat to the skull. Just a second-long glimpse, but vivid. A girl, maybe early 20s, screaming as she was dragged through the woods by someone I couldn't see. Her heels dug trenches in the moss. She reached out toward me. I was standing still, watching her. Not helping, not running. Just watching. And then the memory was gone. I threw the bundle into the trash. That night I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the porch. I looked out the window, and no one was there. In the morning, the moss bundle was back, placed neatly on my nightstand. Dry this time. I didn't tell Katie. Instead, I bought a bus ticket back, and from there, I hitched a ride as close to the forest as I could get. I told myself I needed answers. I told myself I wasn't going to find where I'd been, but the truth is, I think part of me was being pulled back. I hiked for hours, through dense undergrowth, relying on flashes of memory I didn't trust. Something guided me, landmarks that felt familiar, turns I knew how to make without even knowing how. Eventually, I found the clearing. Rough ring of rocks, patches of scorched earth. In the center, a small tree, stump, surrounded by animal bones. A campsite, maybe, but wrong. There were charred clothes in the underbrush, human bones mixed with animal, dozens of them. I knew I'd been there before, and I hadn't been alone. My knees gave out, and I sat on the ground, shaking. Then I heard something, movement behind me, a person walking slowly, crushing leaves underfoot. I turned, but there was no one. I swear I could feel someone standing just out of view, watching and waiting. Then I remembered. The girl's name had been Anna. She was a hitchhiker I met in a town called Grangeville. She was broke. I offered her a ride, and she said she wanted to see the mountains, and I brought her out there. Not to kill her. I didn't think I was capable of that, but something had wanted her, and I'd obeyed it. I couldn't explain it. I still can't. All I know is that I brought her into the woods deeper and deeper, until she started getting scared, and then she tried to run, and I watched as she disappeared into the trees, screaming. The last thing I remember before waking up under that pine tree. I stumbled out of the forest 2 days later. The police chalked it up to trauma, maybe schizophrenia, maybe dissociation. No one believed the rest. They never found Anna or the clearing or the bones. I told them I was hallucinating. That seemed easier for everyone. But I know the truth. Something happened to me out there. Something got into me. And something happened to Anna. Sometimes late at night, I still hear that voice in my head, whispering the words I heard in my dreams. It waits in the hollow. We now wait in the hollow. People think the scariest thing in the woods is a bear. Maybe a cougar if you're unlucky. But bears don't hunt people. Not really. They'll maul you if you surprise them or mess with their cubs. But they're not predators of humans. Not by instinct. You want to know what hunts people? Dogs. Not pets, not strays. I mean wild dogs. The kind born in the woods and raised by desperation. Packs made of mutts and escapees and abandoned hunting dogs. Dogs with nothing to lose and no humans to answer to. They remember how to hate you, how to chase you. They're not scared of people anymore. I learned that the hard way 3 years ago, and I've never gone back into the woods since. It started with a hike. I'd taken 2 weeks off work after a long stretch of burnout. Office jobs, emails, meetings. That could have been messages. The usual. I needed space, so I packed my gear and drove up to the northern boundary of the national forest. Not the popular trails. Too many people with Bluetooth speakers and inflatable mattresses. I went for the places that barely showed up on maps. Old logging roads and game trails no one's touched in a decade. It was mid-October. Dry air, golden light. Leaves just starting to die on the trees. I parked off a gravel road, shouldered my pack, and headed in with plans to spend 4 days solo. I didn't see another person the whole first day, which at the time felt perfect. The first sign came on the second morning. I woke early, crawled out of the tent, and walked down to the creek to refill my water. When I got back, something was off. At first, I thought maybe I just misplaced things, but then I saw the marks. Tooth marks. My food bag had been dragged a few feet and chewed. Clean punctures in the plastic. My bootlaces had been gnawed. There were muddy paw prints all over the clearing. Not a raccoon, not a bear. Dogs. And more than one. And big. The prints were fresh, damp and sunken in from the morning dew, but I hadn't heard a thing during the night. That's what unsettled me the most. I packed up and moved camp, heading 3 miles east along a ridgeline. The woods were quieter than usual. No birds, no squirrels, just wind through dry leaves and the occasional creaking trunk. Around late afternoon, I caught movement up ahead, something dark slipping between the trees. A deer? No. It was lower to the ground, smoother and controlled. I froze, then I saw another shape, then a third. They were watching me, not running, not hiding, just keeping pace, flanking me through the trees. That's when it hit me. They were surrounding me. I kept moving, didn't run, didn't stop. Every time I glanced to the left or right, I saw them. 7 or 8 shapes, all silent, all shadow, like they knew how to not crack branches, like they'd done this before. When I finally stopped to set up camp, I did it in a hurry. No fire, no cooking, just an energy bar, water, and my knife in my hand while I sat in the dark, heart pounding so loud, I thought it would draw them in. I didn't sleep that night, but I heard them. Low growls, snapping twigs, panting. They were just beyond the circle of trees, waiting. At sunrise, they were gone. I broke camp and ran. No trail, no bearings, just downhill, hoping to hit a road, a river, anything. I moved fast for hours, knees screaming, ankles twisting in roots and rocks. I didn't stop until I tripped and went down hard in a ravine. Sprained my wrist, split my lip, but I got back up anyway. I kept going until I found an old logging road, barely more than 2 ruts in the earth, overgrown with ferns. I followed it, limping now. The sky was starting to turn gray. Then I heard something behind me, closer this time, breathing wet and loud, like something excited. I turned and there they were, 8 of them, all different breeds, some familiar, others twisted by starvation. One had the black and tan body of a Doberman, with the thick neck of a pit bull. Another was mottled in gray with one milky white eye. A smaller one, almost fox-like, had no ears and half a jaw. They just stood there 20 yards back, silently. The leader stepped forward. A massive shepherd-looking thing, ribs visible under its coat, yellow eyes, scars across its muzzle. It didn't bark, didn't growl. It just looked at me and tilted its head, like it was studying prey. Then together they stepped off the trail and vanished into the trees. They could have killed me right then, but they didn't. They wanted to hunt. The next 36 hours were a blur of panic, fatigue, and near hallucination. I tried doubling back. They cut me off. I climbed a rock face to escape. They waited at the bottom for hours. At one point, I came across a gutted deer still warm. Its stomach had been torn out, eyes eaten, not killed for food, just torn apart. A message. At night, they came closer. I could see their eyes in the dark, low to the ground, flickering as they moved in circles around my camp. I tied myself up in a tree with my cord, 15 feet off the ground. They howled once all together, and then sat down, waiting. By the fourth morning, I was broken. My feet were covered in blisters. My hands were raw. I'd stopped eating. My water filter was clogged. My compass had been lost in the fall. I didn't even care where I was going anymore. I just kept moving. I don't know how long I wandered after that. At some point, I dropped to my knees in a patch of dead pine needles and just stayed there. I waited for them to finish it, and they came, but not fast. They approached from all sides, quiet, controlled, a perfect circle inching closer, eyes locked on mine, teeth bared. And I remember thinking, this is it. I'm gonna die in the woods, ripped apart by animals. No one even knew we're here. Then, as if by divine accident, I heard the rumble of an engine, a four-wheeler, some local hunter maybe, a ranger, I don't know. But when that sound hit the trees, the dogs scattered like smoke. Gone, silent. Not a howl, not a snarl, nothing. I was found 2 miles from the nearest access road, collapsed on a slope, barely conscious. They said I was hallucinating, that dogs don't hunt people in packs. That's what I saw were coyotes, or maybe 6 strays drawn to my food. But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't see the way they moved together, the intelligence, the planning. They didn't see the leader. He wasn't wild, he had a tag, a green one clipped to his left ear. I think someone made that pack, trained them, released them. And out in those woods, far beyond where most people ever go, they're still hunting, still watching, still waiting for the next hiker who wanders too deep and alone. I've always liked being alone in the woods, not in some dramatic loner sense. I just think there's a peace out there you can't find anywhere else. No cell service, no noise, just trees, birds, and wind. The occasional crunch of your boots on pine needles. But after what I found last spring, I don't go into the woods anymore. Not alone, maybe not ever again. It started like any other solo trip. I took a week off work, packed up my gear, and drove 6 hours north into the deep part of the National Forest by West Virginia. There's a section out near the canyon that's barely mapped. No service, no official trails, no rangers. I'd found it on a forum for backcountry hikers. A guy had posted a grainy satellite image of a glade with a creek running through it, swearing it was the most peaceful place he'd ever been. No coordinates, just rough bearings and a challenge. If you can find it, it's yours. So I went looking for it. It took a day and a half of hiking to even get close. I bushwhacked over 2 ridge lines and followed a narrow gate trail into a hollow so deep the air felt like it belonged to another time. Everything down there was heavy and wet. The trees leaned in close together. The ground was mossy and spongy beneath my boots. It smelled like mildew and rust. By late afternoon, I found the glade. It was beautiful and isolated. A creek ran through the center, just like the post said, with big flat stones on the bank, perfect for sitting. I dropped my pack, made camp, cooked dinner, and fell asleep with the sound of water in my ears. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up needing to use the washroom. I stepped out of my tent, walked a short distance into the trees, and that's when I saw it. A small opening in the hillside. I noticed, because of the cold. The night was already cool, maybe in the 40s. But as I passed near the opening, a freezing draft blew across my legs. like someone had opened a walk-in freezer behind me. I turned and saw it. A tunnel, maybe 4 feet high, carved into the base of a mossy slope. It wasn't natural. The entrance was too clean, too square, notched almost. The way it angled down into the earth reminded me of an old mine entrance, but narrower. No smell, no sounds from inside, just cold air rolling out, slow and steady. I should have ignored it, but curiosity gets the better of people like me. The next morning I went back to it. I took my headlamp, a spare flashlight, and a 100-foot coil of paracord. I tied one end to a root outside the entrance and crawled in on my hands and knees. The first thing I noticed was the tunnel wasn't dirt, it was stone. The walls and floor were rough-cut rock, like someone had chiseled it out a long time ago. There were old tool marks on the walls, faded by time, but unmistakable. The tunnel sloped gradually down, and after about 20 feet, the light from outside was gone completely. I kept going. At 40 feet, the tunnel widened slightly, enough for me to crouch instead of crawl. I was breathing heavier now, but not from exertion. Something about the air in there felt wrong, thin and metallic. At 60 feet, I found the first alcove. It was carved into the right wall, a shallow recess, maybe 3 feet wide. Inside was a stack of stones, carefully piled with small objects placed on top. A rusted knife blade, a broken pocket watch, a child's shoe. Each item was old, weathered, and out of place. I stood there for a long moment, the beam of my flashlight trembling against the stones. Then I heard a sound behind me, like a footstep on rock. I turned, light swinging wildly, but the tunnel was empty all the way back to the rope. I called out. My voice echoed oddly, too sharp, like the sound had nowhere to go. I told myself it was water, a rock falling. I kept going. At around 90 feet, the tunnel split, a crude fork left and right. I should have turned back then, but I wanted to know what this place was. I had the paracord. I thought I was being smart. I chose the right path. Almost immediately, I noticed the carvings. Not letters, not runes, just scratches, thousands of them, carved into the stone at shoulder height, some deep, some surface marks. They covered the walls like a language I couldn't understand. The tunnel narrowed again. I had to duck. That's when I smelled it. Rot. Not fresh, not recent, but old, dry, like the inside of an abandoned freezer filled with spoiled meat. I swept my light ahead. There was another alcove deeper than the first, and in it, I still don't know what it was. Bones, yes. Human, probably not, but arranged weirdly, kneeling almost. A rusted tin can where the mouth would be. Hands, or what was left of them, folded in its lap. All of it coated in a fine layer of white dust. The light flickered just once. But in that half second of darkness, I swear I saw someone standing behind the bones. I turned and ran. No shame, no hesitation. I scrambled back toward the fork, heart pounding in my throat. I nearly dropped the flashlight. My backpack caught on the ceiling, and I ripped free of it, leaving it behind. I followed the rope back, crawling, slipping. At one point I thought I heard something behind me crawling too, fingers against stone, steady, unrushed. I didn't look back. I burst into daylight covered in dirt, panting and shaking. And when I looked down, the paracord was cut clean. I didn't sleep that night, didn't eat. I packed everything and left before sunrise. I hiked 20 miles in 2 days without stopping. Slept an hour here and there under trees. I didn't speak to anyone until I was back at my car. When I got home, I filed the tip anonymously to the Forest Service. Said I'd found suspected mine in the area that someone might be living in it. They said they'd look into it. They didn't ask for my name. That was 6 months ago. I haven't heard anything since. But some nights, when the house is quiet and the wind is still, I swear I can hear a soft scraping sound coming from the crawl space under my bedroom floor, like fingers on stone. If I'm being honest, we shouldn't have gone up there. Not because we weren't prepared. We were. We had gear, food, water, maps, and satellite GPS. We were experienced hikers, careful and cautious. We'd done worse routes before. We shouldn't have gone because Matt wasn't right. Not before the trip, and especially not by day 3. But I ignored the signs, because he was my best friend. Because I didn't think something like that could happen out there, in the real world. with someone I knew so well. Turns out, the woods are the worst place to lose your mind, because out there, no one's going to stop you. Matt and I had known each other since we were kids. We grew up outside of Asheville, North Carolina, thick with hills, trails, and old southern woods. We were both 31 when it happened. We've been doing these trips since college, 2 or 3 a year, a way to get away from screens and expectations, clear the fog. That spring, we decided to try a less traveled section of the Appalachian backcountry, near the Georgia border. High elevation, no service, no towns for miles, 5-day loop. I was stoked, but Matt seemed off. Quieter than usual, zoning out mid-sentence. I asked if he was okay. He said he was. Said work had been stressful, that his dreams had been weird lately. Should have pressed harder. Day 1 was uneventful. Crisp air, scattered clouds, just enough of a chill to keep bugs down. We hiked 10 miles and made camp near a ridge. Matt seemed to loosen up after a hot meal and a fire. We drank whiskey out of tin cups and laughed about dumb stuff. Felt like old times. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to him talking in his sleep. At first I thought he was dreaming. Then I realized he wasn't talking to himself. He was whispering, pausing like he was waiting for a reply. He said things like, "I don't remember that." "What do you mean, go back?" "I can't. Not yet." I asked him in the morning and he laughed it off. Said I probably dreamt it, that he didn't remember anything. But his hands were shaking when he packed up his gear. By the second day, Matt was dragging. Said he didn't feel great. Claimed he hadn't slept. That something had woken him up. Branches tapping on the tent or voices in the trees. He said it like a joke, like he knew it sounded nuts. I told him it was probably deer or wind. It happens. But then around midday, he stopped on the trail and just stood there. Not like he was tired, like he was listening. I asked what he heard. He looked at me and said, "You didn't hear that?" "Hear what?" He pointed into the woods. "A woman. She was calling me by name." I didn't hear anything. I told him that gently. He stared at the trees for a long time, then said, "She said she's close." That night was the turning point. We made camp in a small clearing surrounded by fir trees. It was quiet. No insects, no owls, just the crackle of the fire. I was reading in my sleeping bag when I heard Matt muttering again. This time it was louder. He was outside his tent, pacing. I called to him, but he didn't respond. I got out and found him walking in circles, barefoot, whispering the same phrase over and over. "She remembers me. She remembers me." His eyes looked wrong. Not wild, just empty. Like he wasn't here anymore. I grabbed his shoulders. "Matt, hey, look at me." He blinked and then said, "She's under the trees. She's waiting. I can't leave until I listen." He pulled away and walked off into the woods. I chased after him. I don't know how far we went. A quarter mile, half. The trees got thicker, and the light got darker. Terrain rougher. I shouted his name again and again. Finally, I found him kneeling by a shallow stream, staring down into the water. He looked up at me and said, "I saw her face in it. She's buried here." I asked who. He said, "I don't know, but she knows me." I convinced him to come back to camp. Had to practically lead him by the arm. He didn't argue, just kept glancing over his shoulder like someone was following us. I didn't sleep all that night. I kept the fire going and my boots on. In the morning, Matt was gone. I found his pack, his jacket, even his boots, but no sign of him. No tracks. Just one thing at a place. A spiral of twigs and stones arranged neatly next to his tent. Something told me he made it. I searched all day, blew a whistle, called until my voice cracked, climbed a ridge and got high enough to get a GPS signal, used my emergency beacon. They found me the next day, but not Matt. It's been 7 months. The search was called off after 10 days. No trace, no sign of a struggle. The dogs picked up nothing. They chalked it up to misadventure. Probably fell, maybe hit his head, maybe kept walking until he couldn't anymore. That's the official line, but I know what I saw, and I know what he heard. A week after I got home, I found something in my backpack. Something I hadn't packed. A strip of fabric, sun-bleached and soft. It looked like the edge of a dress, torn at the seam. It smelled like damp earth. And underneath it, written in charcoal on a folded scrap of matte paper, were the words, "She remembers you too." I don't like talking about what happened up there. Not because I'm ashamed or because people won't believe me. I just don't like remembering how close I came to dying with no one around but trees and time. If it weren't for my dog, I wouldn't be here. And that's not a poetic sentiment, that's a fact. Blue saved my life. It's supposed to be a 3-day hike. Nothing extreme, just me, my pack, and Blue. My 5-year-old Blue Heeler. He's been my hiking partner since he was a pup. Smart, obedient, and steady under pressure. I trusted him more than most people I know. The plan was to do a remote loop in the national forest, early spring before the crowds came in. I'd done the loop once before a few years back, and it had been a little overgrown but navigable. This time I brought a newer map, a GPS, my compass, and plenty of supplies. It should have been easy, but the thing about the woods is, they don't care about your plans. The first day went fine. Weather was cold but clear. Blue trotted ahead on the trail like he always did, never more than 30 feet out. That's something he'd always done, scout a little ahead, then wait for me. At night, we camped beside a creek, and I fell asleep to the sound of water and his quiet breathing outside my sleeping bag. The second day, the trouble started. Around midday, I hit a fork in the trail that wasn't marked on my map. The left fork looked newer, maybe made by Forest Service or game, but the right matched what I remembered from my last trip. I went right. That was mistake number 1. Mistake number 2 was assuming I could cut down toward the river valley when I realized the terrain had changed. I thought I could reconnect to the loop and save a couple miles, so I took us off trail. The trees got thicker, the light dimmer. By the time I realized how badly turned around I was, I couldn't see the sun through the clouds. That night, I set up camp in a shallow ravine. I still didn't panic. I had food, water, my emergency beacon, and a good dog. Then, my GPS froze. Just stopped working. Screen locked up, no signal. My compass needle started doing slow circles. Battery's fine, no damage. It just stopped helping. Blue didn't sleep that night. He sat facing the woods, ears up, like he was waiting for something to move out there. On the third day, I tried to backtrack, but nothing looked familiar. I retraced my steps, my terrain, memory, but the landmarks were wrong. Rock formations I was sure I passed before weren't there. Trees I'd marked with chalk had no marks now. I started to feel like the forest had shifted around me. Then I noticed something else. Blue wouldn't go left. Every time I tried to veer west toward where the trail should have been, Blue stopped and growled. Not at me, at the forest. He refused to move unless I turned a different way. I started listening to him. That night I woke to the sound of crunching leaves, close. Blue was up before I was, crouched low, teeth bared but silent. I thought it might be a deer or a bear. I listened. Then I heard a voice. Not a person, not clearly, just enough to chill my blood. It said something like, "Come here," but wrong, off, like someone trying to sound human, but not quite managing it. The cadence was too slow, the syllables too clean. I froze, my breath caught. Blue started to growl. Whatever it was kept repeating the same phrase over and over. "Come here, come here." Then silence. I didn't sleep after that. The next day I walked without a real plan, just following Blue. He moved with purpose now, not trotting ahead, but staying beside me. Every so often he'd stop, sniff the wind, and change direction. And every time we stopped, I'd hear something behind us. Branches cracking, a slow shuffling sound, like something was following us, staying just out of sight. Once, I thought I saw it. A figure, human-sized, pale skin, but when I blinked, it was gone. Blue snarled at the trees, not in fear, in warning. That night, I lit a fire, though I barely had fuel left. I sat beside it, knife in hand, while Blue stood at the edge of the light, staring into the dark. And then, the voice came back, closer this time. "Come here." Blue barked once, loud and sharp, and I swear, just for a second, the trees responded. A gust of wind, a ripple of motion, like something pulling back. I whispered, "Good boy," and I started to cry. On the 5th morning, I was running out of food. My water was low. I hadn't slept more than a few minutes at a time. I was starting to hear things, even in the daytime. Movement where there was none. Voices sounded like my mother's or a childhood friend, but Blue kept going. Around mid-afternoon, he stopped suddenly and sniffed the air, tail twitching. Then he bolted. Straight ahead, no hesitation. I had to sprint to keep up. He ran down across the dry creek bed and up the opposite slope. I followed him blindly, lungs burning, until I stumbled onto an old trail I hadn't seen in years. Flat and clear, with fresh boot prints in the mud. Blue was standing there waiting, tongue out, tail wagging. I dropped to my knees and held him, just sobbing into his neck. It took another 2 hours, but I found a ranger's cabin. They got in my emergency beacon ping days ago, but had never transmitted a location. They were organizing a search party when I walked out of the woods, covered in scratches, 20 pounds lighter, and barely holding together. They asked how I found my way out. I just said, my dog. Blue's older now, slower, grayer around the eyes, but sometimes if we walk near the woods, he'll stare into the trees for a long time, ears flat and watching. I wonder if he remembers what was out there, because I do. And some nights when the wind cuts through the trees just right, I still hear it. Come here. And Blue starts growling in his sleep. People don't vanish like they used to. That's what I told myself as I turned off the main road, the glow of civilization receding in my rearview mirror like a dying star. There was a time, maybe 100 years ago, when a man could walk into the woods and never come out, and nobody would think twice. Just another name whispered in the taverns, another cautionary tale. That doesn't happen anymore. Now we have GPS, satellites, search parties with helicopters and scent dogs. Now we have cell towers. So when I disappeared for 12 days and no one could find me, when I came back looking like something the trees had spat out, it raised questions. I'm not supposed to talk about what happened. Not to the authorities, not to my sister, not even to myself, really. I've told people I had a psychotic break, that I went off my meds and got lost. Easy to believe when you see the scars, the tremors, the 1,000-yard stare. And that's not the truth. The truth is something I think the forest itself is trying to bury inside me, and I'm fighting to dig it out. I left Portland in mid-September. It was supposed to be a long week vacation. I told everyone I was headed to the coast. I even posted photos from an old trip to make it believable. But that wasn't where I went. I drove east into the mountains, way past the popular trailheads. I found a stretch of national forest online, remote, barely trafficked, rumored to be haunted by logging crews in the 60s, the kind of place that no longer appears on most state maps, even though the land is technically still public. There was something about the place I couldn't explain. The name stuck in my head, Cradle Ridge, like the trees themselves were rocking something to sleep. I wanted real solitude, no receptions, no emails, no text from my boss asking if I could hop on just for one quick call. I brought gear for 7 days, a tent, freeze-dried meals, tablets, an axe, and my father's hunting knife, and a revolver I'd bought 6 months earlier after a break-in. Never fired it, just kept it in my pack, loaded, for peace of mind. The first 2 days were uneventful. The forest was dense, so dense that I had to cut through overgrown brush and decaying overgrowth to stay on my planned course. Everything smelled of wet bark, sap, and the faint copper of distant decay. I followed no official trail, just the lines I'd marked on my map, guiding me towards a long, abandoned logging road that hadn't been used since the 80s. By night 2, I'd reached the ridge. I set up camp on a mossy ledge overlooking a valley so deep I couldn't see the floor. No stars, no moon, just the trees swaying like giants keeping secrets. I remember thinking how quiet it was. Too quiet. No crickets, no owls, no wind. It was like the woods were listening. I should have left then. The drums started on night 3. Low, slow, and hollow. Boom, boom, boom. Like a heartbeat being mimicked by something unalive. I sat up in my tent, flashlight off. I didn't move, I didn't even breathe. I just listened. The sound came from the valley down below. A place no roads reached. No cabins, no people. I lay back down and didn't sleep. By morning, the forest felt different. I couldn't place it. It wasn't just the sound. It was the air. Heavier, wetter. Every step felt like waddling through fog. My GPS stopped syncing. Compass started spinning. I marked a tree with my knife and moved on. But 20 minutes later, I passed the same tree. My mark, fresh, sap, still weeping. I laughed at first. Told myself I had made a mistake. Took a wrong turn, so I tried again. A new direction. I cut another mark. 2 hours later, I passed it again. That was when I realized the forest wasn't letting me leave. By late afternoon, I saw the first sign. A small wooden carving nailed to a pine trunk, too high for anyone to place without a ladder. It was a crude image. Someone kneeling before a giant tree, arms spread wide, face carved. Underneath it, burned into the wood. The root remembers. I stared at it for a long time, then I moved on. I don't remember how I found them, or if they found me. I just remember the smoke. The trails curling through the branches, sweet, musky, tinged with something acid-like. I followed it without thinking, without choosing to, and then suddenly I was there. A hollow of land, sunken in the earth like a wound. Inside it, a dozen wooden structures, warped by rain and age but clearly lived in. Between them, moved people, quiet, slow, and barefoot. They wore robes of bark and stitched hide. Some had masks, long, narrow things made of twisted vines and bone. Others had painted faces. None had hair. One saw me and smiled. He raised his hand and said only, "You came. The root called." I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was welcomed. They took my pack, my clothes, dressed me in linen, fed me a paste of fermented roots and meat I couldn't identify. I vomited the first night. They didn't seem surprised. The cult called themselves the Kindred Root. They believed that the world had become a lie and the old growth beneath the forest would reclaim it. That deep below the soil was something ancient, something aware, and they had been chosen to awaken it. They believed they were already dead, that the moment they'd heard the drums they crossed over into the root stream, and that all that came after was preparation. For what? I didn't know. They told me the forest chose who stayed. I asked how long they'd been there. They smiled and says, "Time doesn't matter once you're swallowed by the roots." I pretended. For days, I think, I pretended I believed them. Ate their food, watched their rituals, listened to their sermons. Every night, the drums. Every morning, the reading. The ones who resisted didn't last long. I saw one man tied to a tree and covered in honey, left for the forest mouth to take. Another was buried up to his neck and left to listen to the dirt. I asked once what was down there, what the root was, and they didn't answer. Just pressed their foreheads to the earth and hummed. The final night came without warning. They painted me with ash and tree resin, wrapped my eyes with moss. Then they led me down into a tunnel beneath the central hut, a place they said was the marrow of the root. I don't remember how far we went. My mind was unraveling. The smell was unbearable. Mold, death, earth, something else. At the bottom I felt heat, heard the soil breathe. Then a voice, not from above, but below me, deep and vast. "Do you see?" It wasn't words. It was meaning pressed directly into my skull. And I saw something. Not with my eyes, those were still blindfolded, but with whatever was left in my mind. I saw a tree so vast it curled under the world. I saw faces in its bark screaming, whispering. I saw roots wrapping around the bones of cities. I saw forests swallowing highways. I saw myself, split open like rotting fruit, fed to a mouth that was never meant to be seen. I screamed. They cheered. I don't know how I escaped. Maybe I never did. Maybe I'm still in that tunnel and life is just a mercy hallucination. But I remember clawing up through the dirt, lungs full of rot, fingers bleeding. I woke up on the side of a road, shaking, covered in old bruises and fresh dirt. A logging crew found me. They said I'd been missing for 12 days. I've moved since then, changed my name, avoided the woods. But sometimes I hear the drums in my dreams. And every so often, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I find a small wooden carving on my doorstep, crude, eyeless, and smiling. And beneath it, burned into the wood, the root remembers.